This podcast would not be possible without my wonderful patrons. I want to thank Steve Vansek, Coach Randy, Rob Barnett, Crystal Carroll, Bella Pori, John Munson, Levi Petrie, Stephen Malio, Steve Rogers, also known as Captain America, Dale Hosek, Terry Smith from Music Talks podcast, Anna Lynn, Chris Bloom, and Mary Thomas, aka Aunt Mary. I appreciate all y'all so much. Thank you for the support. And now, on to the show.
If I go from 84, the Born in the USA album, I know a faint memory is that I had these things called J cloths. Are they called that in the States? They're like dishcloths. I tied a dishcloth around my
Okay,
head to
yes.
do the bandana.
Okay,
So
good.
I don't know, but as a matured musician, music guy, I love the live video of Murder Incorporated from the 90s. That was going on whilst there was the British Britpop Oasis thing. But to be honest, when there was that 9/11 telethon, you remember when he played My City of Ruins there? I found that really moving. And I'd already seen him a couple of times live, but as a kid. And I think when he live is when it really, there's people say there's people who love Bruce Springsteen and then people who haven't seen him live. I
What?
remember that performance was a big thing for me, but it was part of like the whole grieving of that, wasn't it? That
Yeah.
performance. But I thought, wow, that was something else. That,
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining me today in a timey-wimey episode, my afternoon, his evening, is Steve Mahoney. Welcome, Steve.
hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it is good to see you. Thank you very much for joining me. Tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I'm from London, as you can probably tell by my voice. I've been a Bruce fan all my life, uh, mainly from my dad. Ever since I was, born in the early '80s, and it was instead of lullabies and nursery rhymes, I heard the river in Nebraska. So I'm a musician as well, probably because of that. So I've played in bands for about 20 years in London and New York, actually. Um, I do a podcast myself, which is comedy interviews. Um, so I'm like being as an artist as much as you can in this day and age, and big Bruce fan. I'm sure you can ask me some questions. I won't give away my answers, but yeah, an artist in London that's very, I think the Bruce thing for me as well changed my life in that I moved to New York in 2009, met my wife there, and so it's really added to my life in like a factual way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like a transatlantic. Someone said to me once in New York that I'm like a New Jersey guy from London. So
Nothing wrong with that.
that must be true.
Nothing wrong with that at all. So,
Yeah.
Steve, I always like to start at the beginning. So, talk about where did you grow up, what part of England, and what kind of music were your family listening to when you were, uh, probably not as young as your son, but but
Well,
yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm from Harrow, which is, I often tell people as a joke that it is kind of the darkness on the edge of town. It's 15 miles out of the center of London.
Okay.
So if you go out of the center of London on the Western Avenue or the A40, there's kind of industrial parts. There's Wembley, and then there's Harrow, and I'm from Harrow, born there. So I'm kind of London is a borough of Harrow. Harrow, sorry, is a borough of London, but like in the very extreme. So Elton John's from Harrow. He's from Pinner, which is part of the posh part of Harrow. And so I'm from there, grew up there. As I say, my dad was hugely into the river when I was born. And, I was brought up with that. What my parents listened to was my dad probably, like 60-70% Bruce. He was also a big Faces fan, Rod Stewart and pub rock kind of Huge Who fan, and then my mum was into Motown, and my dad's also into soul music. So I'm also a big Bobby Womack fan, just because of my parents, because that's what I heard growing up, and Marvin Gaye and Diana Ross and stuff like that. So a mixture of kind of British lad rock, Springsteen, and kind of Motown 70s stuff. There was a lot of good music. I'm very grateful to my parents for that, actually.
You didn't go through a spell where you're rebelling against their music, I take it.
Not well. In the 90s here, we had Britpop.
Yeah.
So I was a huge Oasis guy and like a mod guy. My dad was a mod as well. So that's like in the 90s, that was Paul Weller and a band called Ocean Colour Scene. And I was hugely into all of that. So I never rebelled, Bruce, but I didn't quite get it as much until the late 90s, when I was actually a proper Bruce fan myself. It's after Britpop. So I wouldn't say I rebelled, but I was still into sort of British guitar pop like Oasis and
Okay.
stuff, which, and the Bruce thing was kind of there, but it was like a, I didn't, like some music fans would be like they are with football fans or something.
Yeah.
I'm a Giants fan, or I'm an
Yeah.
Arsenal fan, or something like that.
Yeah.
The Bruce thing was there, like, oh, Bruce is in my heritage,
Yeah.
but I never
Yeah.
rebelled.
Yeah. It is kind of right that um normally if your father was a in baseball terms a Yankees fan, or like a Manchester fan, or an Arsenal fan, right, like your family, and then every once in a while you get the little brother or something, like, no, I'm going to pick I'm going to be a Red Sox fan, or I'm going to be
Yeah,
something, something else, just to be crazy.
yeah.
Well, you mentioned it, Steve, so I think that's a good transition. Can you remember when you talked about you've always known of Bruce? So I usually ask the question, when did you first discover Bruce and what about him spoke to you? But I'll twist it a little bit with you. When did he first come from being this kind of back of your mind, always there, to all of a sudden, hey, wait a minute, this
Mm.
is something a little bit more than I thought it was?
Uh, wow. If I go from 84,
Yeah.
the Born in the USA album, I know a faint memory is that I had these things called J cloths. Are they called that in the States? They're like dishcloths. I tied a dishcloth around my
Okay.
head to
Yes.
do the
Okay.
bandana.
Okay,
So
good.
I don't know, but as a matured musician, music guy, I love the live video of Murder Incorporated from the 90s.
Mhm.
That was going on whilst there was the British Britpop Oasis thing. But to be honest, when there was that 9/11 telethon, you remember when he played My City of Ruins there?
Yeah.
I found that really moving. And I'd already seen him a couple of times live, but as a kid. And I think when he live is when it really, there's people say there's people who love Bruce Springsteen and then people who haven't seen him live.
Yeah.
So I
What
remember that performance was a big thing for me, but it was part of like the whole grieving of that, wasn't it? That
Yeah,
performance. But I thought, wow, that was something else. That you know,
because what I always say is there's two types of people: the people that um go to their first Bruce show and go, "Wow, that was long." And then the others that say, "Oh my goodness, when can I do this again?" Right?
yeah, my wife would say it's a bit long.
Yeah. So I don't get this a lot, but I do get it sometimes. Um, I real quickly, and my regular listeners will skip ahead a couple of minutes if you don't want to rehear this, but I was a casual fan. I
Right.
certainly, like everyone else in America, born in the USA. The River was the first time I really knew him. Hungry Heart, but kind of had drifted off. Like, not just 89 was when we had our son. There's other things going on, and I remember that telethon very strongly, and seeing that, and it was, oh yeah, this is amazing. Yeah, how did I forget about Bruce Springsteen, right? And then 2002 was the first time I saw him live. I saw him on
Hmm.
the Rising tour, and I went, what? what? And so, that that stumbled into now that I'm doing a Springsteen broadcast that depending on the day, my family will be kind and say I'm passionate, and other days they will say obsessed.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's good to, but it's like if it gives something to your soul, like I
Yes.
need Bruce YouTube videos in almost like a therapeutic thing to change my mood,
Yeah.
So that's what it's like for me, and probably for my dad, and probably for you. And
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. I mean, in fact, we to as we're recording this, it's the week after um, the second round of the NFL playoffs, and during the playoffs, um, we play "Dream Baby Dream" is the last song we play before we turn on the TV and start the game. You
What? So
know,
you play it at
no, no,
home?
yeah, we play the video. I
Oh,
don't,
okay.
I don't play music. I wish I did, but we
Mm.
play a video. We play we play that song. Um, and I was visiting my brother, and my brother's not doing well, and so I was there on Friday visiting with him in Houston, which is about 3 or 4 hour drive away. And as I left, I had tears in my eyes, and I had to play "I'll See You in My Dreams,"
Mm.
then "Land of Hope and Dreams,"
Yeah.
right? And then, okay, kind of now we can go on to other music. Now I can listen to a podcast to drive that 4 hours. But
Yeah.
I I do. Um I love how you're saying I think for a lot of us that is medicine for our soul. They have chicken soup for the soul, Bruce Springsteen for the soul. I think that's really well said, Steve. Very nice.
Yeah, and I think he understands pain. And
Yes.
someone would say, "Oh, this guy's got all this money and blah blah blah," but it's not about that. He's suffered in his own way, and that's kind of there in the defiance of the music, and why people he's a magician in a way that I don't think he even gives himself credit for. Because he'd say he puts on his dad's clothes and it's all a shtick and all that, but he's onto something that touches people, and men especially, whether they're from New Jersey or Dallas or London. It's so interesting to me. He has got something that people tap into, and it just helps them, emotionally.
Well,
Interesting.
it's that great line, and most people enjoyed the Blinded by the Light film. I really loved it, and I was lucky enough to talk to Gunder, the director. But
Mm.
that line at the end where the hero's dad says, "I think this man is Pakistani," and
Yeah,
and
he understands. Yeah, it's
yes,
like
he understands. And
yeah, yeah.
and there are I've had people from all over the world join me on the
Mm.
podcast, and they have that. I relate. He speaks my language. you
Yep.
know um I and there's actually an article out there that Bruce Springsteen, lesbian icon. you know
Wow.
and it just, you would, here's a, at the time 60-year-old white straight guy, but is speaking to this other group. And so yeah,
Mm.
I totally agree. You mentioned seeing a couple of young, like when you were young, I guess your parents took you to a show, but t- I always like to preface how many times you've seen him is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are.
Mm.
But for the record, do you count? And if so, how many?
Well, I did just earlier, and
Yes.
I've done 14 shows.
Okay.
Um, the first was I get this wrong. I thought it was Hillsborough, but it's Bramall Lane in Sheffield in 1988,
Okay.
and that's the only time I've been to Sheffield. I was with my dad and my mum, and we went to the gig at the stadium. Ton of Love tour. I remember for some reason that he played Light of Day, and I remember saying to another kid that we were with, "This is not a real song. This is like my dad went, no, it is a real song, because going 1,000 miles and all that.
Yeah.
That's kind of at the time I thought, is this a song? What is this? This is like a
Yeah.
rap or something.
Yeah. Is
So yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
But I was at that one, and yeah, there's 14 other gigs all over the world that I've seen. I don't know
Mhm.
if you want me to go across them all, or
So, what's the furthest you've been to see him?
well, the furthest from London is probably New Orleans Jazz Festival in 2014.
Yeah,
I was at that one. Just getting my little list here. I mean, I was at Madison Square Garden '09, the River Show, which is probably the best show I've ever seen.
that was
I
the
was,
first time, and at the time he said, "We will never do this again." Right?
yes,
Like
so
we
it
will
felt
never
very
tell.
special.
Yeah, then he did a whole tour of them, but it
Yeah.
still was special. Yes.
But for me, the fact that it was unrehearsed
Yeah.
and Clarence was there
Yeah.
and it was felt very special. I mean, I knew it was rehearsing that later, but you know, if someone was to ask about the set list question, what songs I haven't seen, they're probably all the rockers on the river. So like I'm a Rocker,
Yeah.
Sherry Darling, all of that. I got to hear them that night. So that's why that's a huge night. And I didn't think I was going to get in. Someone on the Backstreets website helped me out there, and I was really trying to get in.
So, were you living in New York at the time?
I was, yeah,
Okay.
and I think it was easier to get into the next night, which was the Wild Innocent show.
Okay.
But I made it into this show, and I was on my own, and it felt
Hmm.
amazing.
Yeah.
And I saw them. Another big one was the New Camp in 2008,
Okay.
Barcelona,
Oh, yeah.
where I went after being at another festival in Barcelona for the weekend. So, bit of a boozy weekend, and me and my friend found our way onto the pitch on the floor because we had seats in the nosebleeds, and we kind of just cheekily went through. And I remember that gig, he played I'm Going Down as a complete audible, and the place just erupted. I'll never forget that. Like, because, obviously the Spanish fans is kind of like a different deal.
Yeah. Sure.
The whole thing's like some fiesta,
Hmm.
but I do remember that, not explicitly, but thinking this is just that few minutes where he played that, the whole place went crazy. So I digress, but there's a
No.
few
No. No.
yeah, the
Well,
furthest I've been is kind of Barcelona or USA from
so
London.
talk to me about going to Jazz Fest. Um, New Orleans is one of my wife and I's favorite cities.
Mm.
There is so much wonderful food and culture and music, even when it's not Jazz Fest. So talk
Mm.
to me about how did you decide to go there and tell me the experience.
Right, well, why do we it's a place me and my wife both have wanted to go. um God, we just went. I don't know, we saw the lineup, which was
Mhm.
also had Bobby Womack,
Okay.
Arcade Fire. I'm trying to. There's like Dr. John, I think we saw there. A
Okay.
few people that their last sort of gigs were there, and obviously, yeah, New Orleans is like the happiest place on earth, which is a big thing for someone from London because we're not we're a cynical bunch, So when it's just
Yeah.
pure happiness on the streets, people blowing like wind instruments in your face and drinking margaritas in the street, that's kind of what we need. So I recommend it. Yeah. But the show was sort of the Sega Sessions type show where he was doing the High Hopes thing. So I wouldn't say it was my favorite Bruce show, but the atmosphere was amazing. And do you know, at that festival, I really enjoyed going into. Me and my wife both enjoyed the gospel tent probably the most.
Mhm.
Speaking of uplifting stuff,
Yeah.
because that was like a stage with 40 brilliant voices singing, live and passionately. Um, so
And
that's what I
and
remember about it.
and the other thing you've got going on is that because it's a festival, it's a shorter set. I mean, he
Mm,
can't do the 2.5, 3 hour sets, right? Um, I have talked to multiple people who were there the first time he did Jazz Fest. That was after Katrina
yeah.
doing the Seegers, and they have talked about how special that was. That even though they've seen multiple shows, just the circumstances of him being there was pretty crazy. So um, it is on my bucket list to do. I have the bad timing. One of my other favorite musicians is John Hyatt,
Mm,
and he's playing at Jazz Fest this year. And
okay.
so I do a Hyatt podcast. And so my co host sent me a text going, I take all your concert money is gone with because of Bruce, right? And I go, yes, Sylvan. Unfortunately, yes. So,
Hmm.
uh, but she's going to see him at Jazz Fest, so that should be a lot of fun.
it's 2 weekends, isn't it? So there's kind of
Yeah,
two
right.
chances. And I
Yeah.
remember we got the train unbelievably from New York. We got like a 20-30 hour train.
Hmm.
So that's how we got there. Um, but hopefully it will be every year. And
Yeah.
I need to go again myself. Definitely.
What do you have tickets for the current tour?
I do, not through me because I've not had the sort of disposable income,
Okay.
but I'm going in May to Dublin through friends. Another couple friends that we have got tickets. Um, so yeah, I'm not kind of on the day refreshing the Ticketmaster or anything like that. I just leave it up to the gods at the moment. So I'm going to that though, and we're booking all the Airbnbs and type stuff like that. Very expensive, and I believe my sister has got me a ticket for Hyde Park as well. Very
Oh, good.
thankfully, and
Well,
if I wasn't going to get into Hyde Park, I would do what I did with the Stones, where I sat outside, and it's still just as loud, and you can see the screen. So
oh, how funny. Well,
yeah.
and I know that's one of the reasons why I didn't see him till 2002 was having our child born in 89. You're broke
Mm.
and you're stressed, and any vacation and holiday time you're saving it in case he gets sick. So yeah, it was in fact, I remember it, when the reunion tour came around, I really wanted to go see them because, it was Bruce and I'd never seen him live, but something was going on with my son. I can't remember, what it was. So pulling back the curtain this year, the he's in Dallas on February 10th, which is my son's 33rd birthday.
Okay.
And I said, I'm buying you a ticket, and he does like Bruce. I said, and we will celebrate your birthday officially on Saturday, February 11th.
Yeah.
and my
Why not?
and my wife asked, "What if he's not okay with that?" I'm like, "I'm not giving him an option." Right?
Oh well.
Yeah,
I mean, you've bought his ticket and he does like Bruce, and
yeah.
it's
So
just
there
one of
we're good.
these things. The diary's
Exactly.
booked.
Yes, it is. It's done. That is awesome. What are your thoughts on some of the later stuff? I want to hear favorite albums and such, but
Hmm.
the Western Stars, Letter to You, the covers album, Only the Strong. What are your thoughts on this last hat trick he sent out?
I'm very positive about it, and it's very easy for fans to be cynical. Oh, it's not as good as 77 to
Mhm.
87 or whatever it is. Um, but especially this trio of albums, I do like a lot. The Brendan O'Brien stuff, I'm not as keen on, but mainly because of the production. There's still great songs there, but I can't. It's kind of a bit like there's
Mhm.
an Oasis album called "Be Here Now" where they were chastised for that one because it was too loud.
Yeah.
So I feel a bit like that about some of the Brendan O'Brien ones, but I do love Western Stars. It's a moody piece. It feels a bit to me almost like a Nebraska type thing with the production at the other end. So it's fully orchestrated and but it's still story songs that are quite dark.
It
Moonlight Motel's amazing. The opener I
yeah.
love. I love
Yeah.
hitchhiking.
To me, it felt like I'm a big fan of the TV show Justified, and
Mm.
it was based on Elmer Leonard novels. And I said it felt like an Elmore Leonard or a Zane Grey, Louis L'Amour, this American West. It I agree more than Ghost of Tom Joad, more than Devils and Dust. Western Stars feels more like a collection of short stories the same way Nebraska did. But as you said, with the beautiful arrangements. Did you enjoy the film?
Yes, the film stuff, Letter to You as well. I haven't been. I enjoyed the Letter to You stuff of the making the album. I almost wanted
Yeah.
more than that, more of that, and less of the kind of voiceover,
Hmm. Yeah.
panning stuff. Um, but yeah, I enjoyed the film. Yeah, it's always good to because I don't know when we'll all hear those songs again. So it's good
Yeah.
to have that film of the Western Star stuff.
Yeah.
Letter to You, I loved, but what my memory of that album is here in the winter of 2020, 21. I used to run like 5 times a week, and that would be my running album from
Okay.
track 1 to like Power of Prayer around there, where
Hmm.
I couldn't run anymore. About 20 minutes in, I
Yeah.
stopped. And I love that. On the opposite of the Brendan O'Brien stuff, the live kind of E Street, I think that's his best sounding album since the 80s. So I loved it for that reason. And then the soul one, love it as well. I think it's kind of a pick me up before Christmas. And like,
Yes.
it's not very fashionable, happy music now, pop music across the spectrum. And so to hear someone doing pure happiness or uplift, I mean, the songs are quite, they're about being dumped and stuff, aren't they? But
Yeah.
it's kind of uplifting. And that was like medicine that was required, I think. So they're very different, obviously. But writing wise, I like Western Stars. Production and like performance wise, I like Letter to You. And then kind of just as a fun thing, I like the Soul one. Yeah, Only the Strong Will Survive.
What I love about it is that he's doing something very different creatively.
Yeah.
He is not trying to um there are literature writers, right, that will say, critics go, well, you know exactly what this person's book is going to be, right? We may change a few characters, but it's similar. And that there's a comfort to that. That's going to be okay. Um, to have such three diverse albums really says that at his age, he's still thinking creatively and still like, what can I do different? How do I keep myself from being bored?
Mm.
And I may be overthinking it. Um, I The rumor is we won't get anything from Western Stars on the tour. That makes me a little sad. I would have loved anything. Um, but it does sound like we're going to get, the rumor is that we're going to get multiple Letter to You songs, and that they're going to throw in a couple of the soul covers, so that will make me very happy.
Mm. I suppose it's different when you're at the show, you know?
Right.
The set list, you'll see them and like, oh yeah, I've seen all this before. But when you're at the show, because I think the direction of the show uh, depends on the reaction to the songs being played. Like I was at the last show was Wembley Stadium 16. I was at that one, and interesting because I think he opened with Seeds, or maybe he opened with a piano song that didn't really work, and then
Yeah.
did Seeds, and then it wasn't a river show. It went all over the place, and he was responding to the audience. So I'm sure that will happen again. But yeah, the Western Stars, it's like Ton of Love, isn't it? You get
Yeah.
one every now and then, but
Yeah.
not enough for someone that's seen him a lot.
Yeah. And what's, you mentioned the audible of that. That happened to me when I was in Houston. A guy had a one step up sign, please do one step up. And he did
Mm,
it, and they were unrehearsed. They just, and in fact, if you Google one step up Houston, you will hear him say, we do not know this. You have made your bed, sir. And then they did a great job because they're the E Street Band, right? They're
mm,
just
mm,
they're all gifted musicians. Um,
mm. I
yeah,
think I've seen that, yeah.
yeah,
But
and
that makes it exciting as well when you're
it
there.
does. Yeah, it does.
It's almost part of the performance art, you know?
Yeah, it really is. So let's talk a little bit. Why did you always have the bug that you wanted to make music?
Uh, since the age of about 14, I got a
Okay.
guitar. My mum got it for I think, Christmas 95.
Okay.
And it was part of the Oasis thing, which
Okay.
I think in America it's not quite realized, because at that time it was still different what was in the charts in the UK and the US. But they were huge. It was a huge thing, especially if you're at that kind of impressionable age, 13, 14. So I learned music out of copying actually Noel Gallagher, the older, more grumpier brother, who used to do an acoustic set in the middle of the show. And it had people like me thinking, I'm surely I could do this, because his was just strumming. It wasn't like coming out with Bruce where he comes out and he's got a different tuning and it's picking and slides and all that. So the bug came from the Gallagher brothers really with me, because they're from a similar like Irish descent, working class background, and it's like if they can do it when they, they before they were in a band, they were doing like construction jobs and stuff. That kind of influenced me to do it. And then I moved on to people like Paul Weller or Neil Young, and they're more accomplished playing. But I don't know, it's performance is interesting because I see my son who's like copying us and being a bit performative. And I
Hmm.
don't know where it comes from, but does something for me, because obviously you can analyze yourself and go, am I a narcissist or an attention seeker and all those sort of negative things? But it's like if it's something you enjoy and you can entertain people, it's kind of that's what it is. I've analyzed why I do it and all that sort of thing. But um yeah, but I don't know if it comes from Bruce. What happens with me is I do have a band here called the Milkshakes that I do gigs with, and that's very Bruce. I think it's very kind of, and even a little bit Little Steven, because I have my wife and another lady who is like singing back
Hmm.
up in a soul way almost.
Sure.
So the Bruce thing has influenced me in a live sense, and probably the Oasis guys and Britpop guys gave me the bug to start doing it at that age, Uh, and it's not been easy the past 10 years or 20 years, maybe, to be a musician because there's no money in it. It's kind of, I'm at the grassroots end where I've run music nights here in London. I ran a night called Chalk Farm Folk for 7 years, I think it was. And I know a lot of musicians and we're all kind of in it together. I'm a grassroots guy. I remember I actually went over and played at the Clearwater Festival in Asbury Park in like 2007, I think it was. And I was in a similar thing. There were the sort of guys from New York were there as well playing. Uh, but the bug where it came from was probably a mixture of Britpop and my parents' music, because my parents aren't performers;
Yeah.
they're like music fans. Uh, the performance side. My granddad played accordion. He was an Irish guy who played accordion around the house, so might
Nice.
come from that a bit. It's the Irish performing,
Hmm.
singing in the pub thing.
What I over the past few years, I've had a lot of musicians join me on the podcast, and like around, especially starting in 2020 during the pandemic, I would have them and I'd say, you know, how do you promote your music, right? Like normally, and I assume this is the same in the UK, but you get enough together that you get a little CD with a few songs, you press them, you then go to a gig, you hope enough people like it that at the end they go, "Hey, Steve, I'll give you, $10 or whatever, 10, 8 pounds or 10 pounds for the CD," and you hope you get enough money to buy the fuel you need to get to the next gig,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And all of a sudden, you can't do that because everything is closed, right?
Mm.
Did it, did the pandemic, I guess, was it, did it spurn you creatively or did it fuel your creativity or maybe a little of both?
It fueled the creativity because I stopped playing live and I wrote a new album actually that I've got coming out in the spring.
Okay.
That's very, it's like the albums I did in my 20s, which are kind of live and more on the Tunnel of Love, um,
Hmm.
Nebraska type thing than Letter to You or something.
Okay.
So I wrote more. I did a podcast where I spoke to other musicians and just chatted about things like this.
Hmm.
But to do it for a living, I've done it a few times where you can become a cover act and go and play at a pub, and especially if you've got a PA system, and get sort of £200 or something, and then you end up playing covers to people that aren't really listening and stuff. Or you can travel in a van around the UK, and anywhere but London's actually quite good for this. Places like Liverpool and
Yeah.
Glasgow and Birmingham are quite receptive. So I've done that, and you can, but it's all very much, yeah, one town to the next, and you have to enjoy what you're doing. And when you do things like have babies or, you know, have different responsibilities, it's kind of different. So the way I see it is that I'm doing something that kind of feeds my soul to do music. It's kind of a, a project based thing where this album I'm doing, Road Trip 3, I've got a gig in London on the 24th of March, and I'm going to congregate friends, fellow musicians who'll join me on stage, and that's kind of it. um, it's not something that's going to like fill my bank account or anything like that, but it's kind of like self-expression. I suppose like Bruce did this, you know, I'm not Bruce or compare myself to Bruce, but he did this soul album, didn't do a gig, spoke
Yeah.
to Graham Norton, spoke to Jimmy Fallon or whatever, and that was it. You know,
Yeah.
there's a few music videos. So he might even feel the same, really, that obviously there's friends I have that travel around Europe playing shows, and you know they break even and they've sold CDs in like, you know, um, houses or in Germany or something, you know, to get there.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't know if my long-winded answer is, but yeah, it's changed. But for me, it's something I do to actually, if I'm doing like a sales job or something, it evens out my soul. If
Sure.
I just went and I don't know, worked in the city here or something like that. I've done loads of sales jobs, you know. And when I do that, funnily enough, I end up doing an album because it kind of, I have the money to record the album, but also it just helps me exist and know that I'm not just a cyborg or something, you know.
Sure. Yeah. It
um,
kind of. Um. So let's make a note. Maybe first part of March. Let's have you back, and let's specifically focus on the new album. Like,
oh,
let's
great,
talk a
yeah,
little bit about the origins. Let's talk about, some of your themes. Maybe go through with a couple of songs. I'll insert a couple of snippets, and then we'll talk about it. Let's do that. I think that'd be fun.
yeah, I'd love to see that. Thanks.
Okay, good. Um, so let's talk about your podcast. So you said you did a music podcast, but now you're just doing one, and it sounds like just to have fun. Share with me a little bit what you're doing.
Yeah, so I did a sales job here in the, what are they called now, the teens, the 2000, I did sales job
Okay.
2014 to 19.
Okay.
And this is going to sound highly illegal or something, but I was told to record the sales meetings by my boss on my
Okay.
phone. I kept them in my top pocket,
Okay.
and so I did that. And then he wanted to listen back to them, so I sent them to him. But then I listened to them, some of these sales meetings, and in order to do a contract or something, I would listen to it for little pointers which would have me, she would remember me or he would remember me,
Yeah.
you know. And so from that, I started getting a bit entertained by listening to my sales meetings. And I thought, okay, why don't I, and podcasts are all the rage. And I'm just not tech. So I, I found a way to do it with voice memos from my iPhone and just started doing a podcast. The first one was with my friends, musicians, Jack Joseph band. We were in a pub in London, and it was a way to make something without paying like 5 grand to make an album like I had been doing in the previous 5 years. Uh,
Yes.
and I'd make it on Audacity, this kind of free program on the computers, and
Yes.
that was it. And it was something I could do where I could speak to the loads of people I was meeting in my sales jobs, the loads of people I was meeting running a music night, and it helped me in the pandemic because I could carry on doing it in this way. And I don't know, it's like an audio, it's like a soundscape where I'd put in funny things, you know, sounds from the 80s or
Hmm.
funny. I interview my baby in it, you know, and he doesn't speak English yet.
Right. Yes, exactly.
So
Yeah.
I'll ask him about what he thinks about, you know, the future of cryptocurrency or something, and
Yeah.
he'll just burble. So the reason I do it, yeah, is to again kind of feed my soul and entertain myself a little bit and collaborate. The original idea was grassroots artists, and yeah, I've had it's 65 episodes in, and I've interviewed, yeah, probably 10 or 15 New York singer songwriters I used to be with, and then 10 or 15 over here. I spoke to comedians and actors and impressionists, you know, um, but it's more popular than my music as well.
And
The stats. Yeah.
and and remind me the name of the podcast again.
It's called A Bev with Stev.
Very
So in an
nice.
office I used to work in, I was called Stev, trying to make the name Steve sound interesting.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, that's quite entertaining, and it's kind of interviews in a comedic way,
Yeah,
like the Mark Maron thing, but probably a bit more stupid. And the person's not famous; it's not Brad Pitt
yeah.
usually.
Uh-huh. Good.
Yeah.
That sounds fun.
Oh,
I will
thanks.
absolutely make sure everyone checks it out. I will include the link. Um, I've had a little bit of fun. I always try to do something for April Fools. 2 years ago, I had a comedian try to be the most obnoxious Bruce Springsteen fan ever. The one I'm like, hadn't done anything since Darkness.
Yeah,
This is,
yeah.
and the whole, if you can count how many shows you've gone to, you're not a real fan. And then
Mm.
last April, I got a comedian from Chicago who played the nightmare guest that just one word answers and
Mm.
yeah, she was a lot of fun. And she was perfect. She would say just enough that you couldn't tell it was a bit. So I'm trying
Mm.
to work on what I'm going to do this April for, I always try to do something fun for.
Well, I've just done something on a new episode I just released where I'm publicising it that I bumped into Christopher Walken in a pub in London.
Okay. Oh, nice.
But it is an improv actor friend of mine who
Mhm.
does a good Christopher Walken, and I've spoke to him as Christopher Walken. So if there's a Bruce impressionist,
Yeah.
or maybe I don't know, there would be an idea
Yeah, I
because I'm
love that.
doing, yeah, I'm doing like an Andy Kaufman thing where but audio, because
Yeah.
there's a lot to can be done, I think, with
Yeah,
audio.
exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, that's good. The we'll check that out. Um, so let us go back. What are some of your go-to albums or songs that have meant a lot to you that you like? I have my little list of when I need to be motivated, I listen to this. This is my kind of bundle of joy that I kind of keep, as a power pack. How about you?
Which changed over the
Sure.
years. The right answer for my dad is The River, especially side two.
Yeah.
For me, my Bruce album is Born in the USA, I have to say. I mean,
Yeah.
and the song Born in the USA, there's a YouTube clip I have ripped on my phone of the full performance, which is
Mm.
like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So that counting he does at the end is actually at 9 minutes, not
Yeah.
at 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So I have to say Born in the USA, the performance, because I think it's just the most unbelievable band performance on record, in my view. I will say the Riverside 2, like my dad. Stolen Car, I love. Like, have you seen the film Copland with Stallone when he
Yes.
puts on? That felt familiar to me when I saw that. Almost like I saw my dad doing that in the 80s, putting
Yeah,
the thing
sure.
on at the end of a day's work. I think I've mentioned Human Touch, funnily enough, the song,
Yeah.
because he hadn't released something for so long, and I was about 11 years old at this time. It was a big thing, and I do still love the song Human Touch. Tougher Than the Rest is huge. It gave me the gimmick as a musician of playing the harmonica at the end.
Hmm.
There's loads of little things like that I've taken. My harmonica influence is Bruce, and a bit of Neil Young. Growing Up is pretty huge for me. I used to play that in my first band when
Hmm.
we were like 21. And one final one I'll mention is the Working on a Dream rap. Would you call it a rap? In the
Yeah.
live version, not
Yeah.
a rap, like literally. So the
Yeah.
sort of, we're gonna take the sadness out there
Yeah.
and bring some hope, and like
Yeah.
that's like a really good therapy session just hearing that. So
Absolutely.
when he did that at the gigs, I thought that the song's okay. I like the song, but that bit is special to me because I think it's a brilliant piece of motivational speech. But in terms of albums, it's Born in the USA. Also love The River. Also love Darkness. Uh, I mean, it's tough, isn't it? I'd go through. I have a affinity for songs throughout the catalog. There's not an album to me that is useless
Yeah.
at all. So yeah, hope that answers that.
No, that does. That's well done.
Oh, one more thing I'll say. Sorry.
Yes, please.
The Darkness on the Edge of Town performance live on the DVD or whatever it is, when they're in the theater, the empty theater, that to me is something really special as well. If that was to be classed as an album, one of my favorites because it's like the core band, isn't it? It's
Yes.
the original band playing it,
Right.
just a six piece maybe.
Yeah.
So that's big for me. If I was to put that on, that's
Yeah.
rocking.
One of the things that I noticed when they released the No Nukes, concert video where they took the two nights and made it into one show
Mm.
is how small the band looks compared to now,
Uh-huh.
right? Like they had the two keyboardists, they had Steven, Bruce, and then Gary, and then Max and Clarence. And now then you have little Steven, Niels, Susie, Patty. It just, I mean, the core group is like 10 people, much less when they have horns or everything. So
Mm.
that kind of made me smile.
Yeah, but when the moment hits again, when you're at the gig and a bit of
Yeah,
fiddle is on something, you're like, oh yeah, you know.
yeah, oh
Uh,
yeah. It,
yeah.
um, I I would love open call. Any member of the E Street Band is always open to join me here, obviously. But I would love to visit with Susie. I just think that
Mm.
would be a lot of fun. Just I agree that, sometimes she will just like one of the covers that I would love to see live, and I don't think I will, is Jolie Blanc.
Mm.
I just and they'll see that where it's a sign request like in Australia, and and she and Charlie are going through it, and they didn't rehearse, they're just
Mm.
picking this up. It there is that little moments, aren't there? Well,
Mm.
speaking of, are there songs you're chasing that you still wish you could see live?
Well, because of I've seen every UK tour since
Yes.
I think the reunion. Anyway, I was at ATA. I wasn't at the other
Yeah.
band. It would probably be for me either Tunnel of Love or other band songs with
Yes.
the E Street Band. So stuff like Lucky Town, Roll of the Dice,
Yeah.
um, Human Touch, and yes, particularly Ton of Love songs because that one maybe suffers from 80s production a little bit to
Right.
me. The sort of I'd love to hear that with like Neil's on a pedal steel and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
that would be
Yeah.
interesting to me. But I've
Okay.
seen all my favorite songs to be honest. I think
That's
even
fair.
down to Incident on 57th Street. If I got that
Yeah.
wrong, uh,
Yeah. Incident. Yeah.
Incident. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of classics. I've seen Darkness in full,
Hmm.
Born to Run in full. So yeah, it would be though the sort of weird hole of the other band songs. I think
Okay.
I'd
Good.
be interested in checking off.
All right.
What's
Um,
yours, or am I allowed to not ask that? Is
no, no,
that
no. You can ask anything you want.
yeah?
Better Days is one of
Oh
my
yeah.
favorite
See, there's
songs. Talk
one.
about
There's
that
one for
that
me.
I would love to hear.
Yeah.
If people ask you your favorite Bruce songs, I usually say Better Days, Land of Hope and Dreams, and the third changes all the time. Um, the
Mm.
first 7 shows I went to, I'd never seen Thunder Road live, and
Oh.
since then I've seen it every night. So I Better Days. Um, I I've only heard Girls in Their Summer Clothes
Oh, that
and
is one.
once. I I've
Yeah.
I I only heard Mary's Place once. I would love to see that again. Um, the it is um the from that Promise box set, Ain't Good Enough, where he talks about Jimmy Iovine. That would
Oh
be a
yeah.
fun song to see.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
you
one of
know,
his best albums as well. Promise. I've got it on vinyl.
yeah, it is. Just it is.
Love it.
Couple of things from the river, like Lion's Den would be fun, Where the
Oh
Bands
yeah.
Are. I've never seen The Promise. That would be good. I was able to go to Broadway, so I saw The Wish, so I knocked that one off.
Hmm.
Obviously, Joe LeBlanc as a cover would lose, and that that's a fair bingo card, right? That's pretty good.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
What's your version of sorry, what's your version of Land of Hope and Dreams? Do you like because that's a big thing there. There's a few different versions.
yeah, so they're all good to me. I love any live version. I love when you hear him, and this is Land of Hope and Dreams,
Yeah.
as they're playing the music. I am just as happy with the Live in '99 version, with the Wrecking Ball version. They're all fine to me. It just is truly one of my favorite songs, so I'm good with that. Um, yeah, I think those are the most of them.
I
Yeah.
forgot about Girls in the Summer Clothes. I mean, for me, the 21st century songs of his are always, for me, Long Walk Home and Girls in the Summer Clothes. And they're from a Brendan O'Brien album, and earlier I was
Yeah,
dismissing
which you
them.
just missed it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
but they
know.
are brilliant.
Yeah, I don't. I'd have to look. I don't think I've seen Long Walk Home either. I would have to look. Um, my first musical obsession was Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys. So
Oh,
to hear Girls in
cool.
Their Summer Clothes feels like a
Mm.
Beach Boy song. It feels like a Brian Wilson song. So like I said, I saw that only once. I'd love to see it again. And it just, and then there's Letter to You that you just go, that would be so much fun to hear. So
Hmm.
any of those, and I'm hoping we're going to get them. Well,
I
good.
was actually I was actually at the Long Walk Home debut. That's something I remembered the other night.
Nice.
The one that was a Sega Session show at Wembley Arena,
Hmm.
and I remember thinking it because that was a different type of show which I enjoyed.
Yeah.
But I think I'd seen a couple of shows already. I'd been to the one in Paris and stuff. So,
Hmm.
but that stood out as the song of the night when he debuted that. And if you listen on YouTube, it's got different lyrics and it's got an extra verse. And yeah,
Isn't
that's something.
isn't
Yeah,
that the one where he said the night before he saw Lucinda Williams and she had her lyrics on stage and he said, "Well, I can do that." Yeah,
yeah.
that's available on the official archive, and I do think that is it is amazing to see it that early. It
Mm.
just, yeah, that's a cool moment.
It's not something he usually does. And
No,
I'd be interested if I think that's a song for me that should be on this tour coming up.
yeah, I think so. With the current political situation in the world, I think Long Walk Home definitely would make my set list.
Mm.
Um, so Steve, before I get to
Thanks.
the
Yeah.
Harry question, anything else I should have asked you that I haven't?
Uh, I think we've done pretty well here.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, this has been a fun
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah.
Uh, I don't know. I mean, I've actually done. I don't know. I'll do it as a musician. I've done some Bruce covers, but as a
Okay.
fan, there's loads to talk about as a fan as well. I mean,
Hmm.
but
Well,
yeah,
I'm
no,
gonna
no.
have you on. Okay. Well, and the reason I ask is
Hmm,
I had someone once, we finished,
hmm.
and after I hit stop the recording, he said, "Oh, next time I should tell you when I got drunk with the E Street Band." And I'm like, "How do you not lead with that story?"
Oh well, actually, I've met Steve Van Zandt. There we go.
Okay.
Outside Minetta Tavern in off Bleecker Street, Minetta Road, is it, or Minetta Street? But that was nothing. I was kind of got his. Did I get his autograph? I sort of said I tried not to go with the. I went. I
Yeah.
love your radio show,
Yeah.
and I was behind him with my wife, and it's him,
Yeah.
and she goes,
Exactly. Yeah.
you. She was like, "You have to do this. You'll never get
Yes.
this opportunity again." And I did start talking to him. He said, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from London." And then I got interrupted by someone else who's a bit more aggressive,
Yes.
and then I kind of disappeared into the lunchtime haze. And
Hmm.
then with Niels, I kind of met him at the back of Shepherd's Bush Empire, the venue here. He plays there quite a lot in London. And I was with my dad, and my dad said, he's a musician. Yeah. And just small exchanges. But I know that my sister encountered
Hmm.
the entire E Street Band at a hotel she was staying in Australia when
Hmm.
they did a gig somewhere, some sort of wine thing that they do over
Okay.
there. She said her and her husband were in the pool with the whole band except
Hmm.
Bruce. Bruce was in some other stratosphere, but he said that's the whole band are in the Nils,
Oh,
Gary.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I've had a couple of encounters briefly and not that special.
So let's book it. First part of March.
Great.
We'll figure out a date. We'll do two topics. One, we'll talk about your album, what's coming up,
Thanks. Yeah.
and I'll give you time, your favorite Bruce covers you've done live, and
Mm.
some you would like to do. That'll be our
Mm.
two topics. How's that sound?
Sounds great. Thanks a
All
lot.
right.
Yeah,
No,
love
that'd
to.
be great, Steve. All right. If you're a fan of Steve, Or maybe you're a fan of Emily and you're just going, hey, let me listen to Emily's better
Those
half.
people do exist.
Yes.
Emily
Uh,
fans.
yeah. So um, Jay Armstrong is an honors English teacher in recently retired from the Philadelphia area. But when he was teaching, he would take 2 days of his honors English class and they would take Thunder Road and break it apart. They would look at all the lyrics, they would talk about the themes and the imagery Bruce uses. And then at the end of the 2 days, he would ask his class, does Mary get in the car? So, Steve, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
So my answer is yes.
Okay.
I think how could she say no? Such a charming. If he is talking to her with this and she gets the message, which I think she does. She's on the porch and all that. So
Okay.
the real thing for me is does the relationship last? So by staying in the car, I would say it probably doesn't last if we look at the narrative of Tunnel of Love and Stolen Car and the side four of the river. So I'd say yes, she gets in the car, but maybe it's a fleeting experience where they do leave town and have a good time. But nothing lasts forever. So
I
I'd like to be an optimist and say she does.
I
You know,
love that answer. One of my favorite answers, a guy said that, speaking of, you mentioned, he said yes, and the sequel is Moonlight Motel, that they get in the car,
oh,
they
oh,
drive to California, and that is him mourning Mary's death in the Moonlight Motel. And
yeah.
I've said that is very romantic. So yeah,
Well,
I
you can
love it.
string together a whole album, can't you, of
Yes, you can.
from across 40 years with that, with the
Well,
Drive All Night and
yeah.
everything.
Well, and then like Racing in the Street, he says she sits on her daddy's porch. Well, is that
Hmm.
the same porch that she walked across? You sure could
Yeah,
be, right?
yeah, and there's
Yeah.
Mary's Place, and
Yes, it is.
uh, I think he knows when he drops a Mary in a song. He hasn't done it for a while, though, has he? So,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um,
yeah.
if someone wants to reach you, what's the best way?
So still, yeah, that's a good question nowadays. Mahoney Returns is me on Twitter
Okay.
and YouTube. Mahoney Returns, loads of stuff going back 15 years on
Okay.
both of those, probably. Bandcamp is where all my music is. Steve Mahoney slash Bandcamp it is or something. And I'm also in a band with my wife called Mahoney in the Moment, which is searchable and everything. We've done a few albums. Bev with Stev is the podcast, which is on all the things, Apple, Player FM, all those things. But I don't know, just message me wherever. And yeah, that's am I answering this well enough?
No, you're doing well.
Mahoney Returns on
On Twitter,
Facebook.
yeah, and let
Yeah,
them know. I'm gonna include all these links in the podcast.
yeah,
Go check out the music, check out the podcast. Steve, this was a blast. Thank you
it
so
was.
much. Yeah, I had a great time. I hope you did too.
Me too. Yeah,
Yeah, let's do it again in March. Listeners, go, please stay safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
brilliant. Bye.
There we go, another episode. I'm about to go through a couple of things where you can reach me and give me feedback. So if you want to skip this, I understand, but I do hope you check it out every once in a while. I'm available on Twitter at Jesse Jackson DFW. The show is available at SetListingBruce. You can send me an email, setlistingbruce@gmail.com. You can send me a voicemail at 469 249 2442. I am currently doing a few other podcasts. Perfectly Good Podcast, John Hyatt from A to Z, where Sylvan Groth and I discuss every John Hyatt song in alphabetical order. My Babylon 5 podcast is Last Best Hope for Conversation, where Lou, Karen, and I discuss every episode of Babylon 5 in chronological order. I still am doing Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast with my brother in time, Charles Skaggs. And then finally, How Many Podcasts, the only podcast on the internet that counts, where my buddies and I discuss pop culture. You can go to our Patreon page and support the podcast for as little as $1 a month. You can go to our Facebook page, like, and please go to iTunes or wherever you get your podcast and leave a 5-star rating and review for all of the podcasts that I'm doing. It's okay if you don't listen to them, but if you subscribe and rate, it really will make my day better. Thank you, and I will talk to you soon.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.